and especially in the intifadas, in the two intifadas. And we've seen also Palestinian youth suffer the utmost. We know the number of children in prisons. We know the suffering of children and the harassment of children by the Israeli army. And not only the very young children, but children are considered from 16 years old by the Israelis. If you're above 16, you're an adult. But we see that this part of the Palestinian population, which is enormous, it's an enormous percentage, is by all means has every right to be very anxious, to be very rebellious, to be fed up with everything, including with the leadership. How do you see that there will be a way out in order to turn all this energy and all this potential that you have in your hands into really bringing up the leadership for a peace process, because they have lost hope after 20 so years of Oslo.
We promised them a political solution we could not deliver. We promised them an independent state that we could not achieve. We promised them jobs. We educated them. By the way, the rate of unemployment among the university graduates is the highest. We educated a very large number of them, but we could not provide them with jobs because Israel have taken the water, the land, the minerals, everything, the trade, the borders. And therefore, I understand really where our young people are coming from. And I think because I emphasize to you a lot what we need to do to reform ourselves, my motivation is by the young people. They need to see us trying hard to resolve the problems that are under our control. We cannot defeat Israel militarily, but we can achieve unity. We cannot today alone stop the settlements, but we can build our democracy. We can really provide a rejuvenation of our institutions, bring our young people, like we did with our women, bring them more to take responsibility in the decision-making process. So there are things we can do, but believe me, the basic problem between our young people and our leadership is our inability to deliver the political promise we gave them. And as you can see, this is not easy. You have some of its taste here in Cyprus. It is not easy, particularly when you're facing an occupier like the Israelis in our land. This doesn't give us at all hopelessness, at all. Look at the demographic statistics, for example. We were 1 million people in 1948. Today the Palestinians are, listen carefully, 14 million people. 7 million are inside the occupied territory and 7 million are still refugees outside. The number of Palestinians that remained in Israel was 120,000 in 1948. Today they are 1,600,000, and they have become a force in the Knesset. So this is not only because our women produce more children, but because nobody is leaving anymore. People have decided to stay inside their country, and therefore that determination, that survival on the land is part of our struggle for the future. Please, yeah.
Doctor, we are welcoming here in Cyprus, and now you know that in Palestine, the Palestinian street, there is like two school of thought between the Palestinian people. And one of them is asking to, let's resolve this Palestinian Authority, let's give Israel all the responsibility as an occupier on the occupied territory, and let Israel face all the consequences of being an occupier. The other school of thought now is, no, we don't want to resolve this PA, we want to protect our achievements through the 22 years, like Palestinian institutions, like Palestinian feeling that they are ruled by themselves, the services and that provided to the Palestinian people by Palestinian Authority. Where do you stand from this debate?
The debate has two other alternatives also. There is a third opinion that says, let's move from an authority to instituting the state on the ground, so that instead of having institutions that serves the interim authority, the Palestine National Authority, 140 countries in the world have recognized this, so why don't we consecrate that state on the ground? This is another alternative. A fourth alternative, people who are saying, let us work again for the one-state solution. Namely, that we do not want an independent Palestinian state. We are willing to accept being citizens in the Israeli state. And then demographically, we should be able to fight the apartheid imposed on us by the Israelis. This is different from the democratic state I dreamt about in 1969. That democratic state was not Israel. It was the substitute for Israel, a democratic, secular, non-sectarian country for all of us, in which everybody has the right to vote and decide. At the present time, Israel's apartheid will not really allow you to join in ruling that country if it ever comes. They want to get rid of you. They just want to dispense with you. They want you to go outside and never stay there. I mean, this is a colonial settler model. And it has, of course, its religious background, and it has its right-wing background, and it has its extremist background. But it is not like the British occupation of Cyprus. Eventually, the British had to go, okay? Or the French occupation of Algeria. Eventually, they had to go. But the Israelis do not think that this land belongs to us as much as they think it belongs to them. So we have to be dispensable. And therefore, we should really do our best to stay close to the land. We should do our best to stay close to our people in order to survive. A day when the world order and the Arab order will change so that it can tip the balance and therefore can chain Israel to come to paradise.
Please, the lady.
Yes, two-pronged question really. One of them is that in every post-colonial country and conflict situation, you have a whole lot of rubbish and scum that rise in every country. You have the divisions and you have the fractures, you have sectarianism, you have favoritism, you have corruption, you have the ones who became rich out of the war situation. And you also have political divisions and alienation, but also the alienation of the young people who were not part of that later on. This is, I think, some of the issues that you need to be dealing with. But at the same time, you talk about unity constantly, which worries me because I don't know whether you're going to... There's the difference between unity and democracy. In democracy may not actually have a unity. You have the right to have your democratic right and your opinion, but it doesn't mean that you have to be unified in that sense. So I think I find your definition of unity a little bit woolly. Secondly, and you need to really clarify that, because like me, other people will be asking, what do you mean by unity within Palestinian Authority and also in the diaspora? The other element of it is you keep referring to Israelis. And I would probably prefer if you were talking about the Israeli government as a separate factor. And also, this actually homogenizes the Israeli society, which means that they're all the same. And I feel also that if you are going to, in Palestine, and set up a Palestinian state, the Israeli public opinion or those people who do want peace with Palestinians have to also be on the agenda. And one of your prongs of working with that is that. And using the word Israeli like in Cyprus, people will say to me, oh, the Greeks think like this, or the Turks think like that. And I said, which Turks? And which Greeks? So I think that we need to be a little bit more careful in how we use definitions, because they will determine what action we take.
The problem with unity is different when you are talking about one geographical space and you are asking for unity within that geographical space. It's different when the disunity is also territorial and not only demographic. And that's the problem with our disunity. It has kept 40% of our people in Gaza in miserable conditions. And therefore, seeking unity is not just seeking unity between Hamas and Fatah. It is seeking unity between the people, the Palestinian people in Gaza and the Palestinian people in the West Bank. Returning them to one economic and political and socio-political unit that will allow them through elections to determine democratically the kind of institutions they have, given, of course, a constitution that does not allow discrimination, that does not allow taking away people's rights to think differently and to have so many other types of differences. The problem we have is territorial disunity, which is depriving 40% of our people, the Gazans, from any normal life. They are in miserable conditions. If you go to Gaza, it's unbelievable. Now, questions of democracy plus a constitution. It's not democracy alone, because you need a constitution to protect minorities, to protect women, to protect children. There are many protections that are built into a democratic system via the constitution. And we have a constitution, an ideal one actually, but it needs a referendum, and a referendum needs democratic elections, and that needs unity. So every time you really think of improvement, you are stuck on the issue of separation. And that is why the agreement with Hamas is simply to form a national unity government that simply does one thing: elections within 6 months. And that these elections will determine the body politic guided by the constitution to run a democratic country and bring back the Gazans and the West Bankers together. I think that's about what's happening in Israel, and what can we do and what do we do that affects the Israelis. I think you really have to think seriously of what has happened to Israel in the last 10 years, demographically and politically. Demographically, there was the addition of 1.5 million Russian Jews who came running out of communism, and they thought that this means that right wing is the way out, as the left wing really disappointed them. Even though right wing and left wing in Israel means something totally different between right wing and left wing in Europe, for example. Right wing and left wing in Israel just talks about settlement and taking the land of the Palestinians. You are right wing if you want all of the land of Israel. You are left wing if you are willing to accommodate the Palestinians. So today the right wing rules Israel. Vast majority. With the demographic changes, and also another interesting demographic change, the religious Haredim right-wingers produce much more children than the secular left-wingers. I mean, secular Labour Party, you have a child per family. A Haredim right-wing family would have 10 children. And therefore, the demographic changes have also caused a shift to the right in Israel. And then finally, the calculus of gain and loss. I mean, Mr. Netanyahu can tell the Israelis, I'm winning for free. So why should I give up anything? Why should I really concede to the Palestinians anything? Why should I really do any real peace process? We win by keeping the status quo. That requires an international intervention. That requires help. And I think that is the kind of thing I just talked about. Thank you.
Yes, I think you have covered to a certain extent. Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. And I think that you have covered to a certain extent the question I was about to ask. And it's related to the ongoing efforts towards reconciliation between Palestinians. Regarding, we see each one's positions vis-a-vis Israel in negotiations. How feasible, to which extent can this be achieved? Between Hamas and the West Bank.
Look, Hamas also went into the same disappointment that we have gone through. Hamas led 3 wars with Israel that almost destroyed Gaza. They were valiant, they fought bravely, and I have no criticism of their willingness to fight for their country. But it is impossible to achieve military victory over Israel. And as a result, Gaza was destroyed. And they cannot claim that they liberated 1 inch of additional land. Therefore, they are going through recalculation. Like we are going through the calculation about the success of the American-led negotiations, they have also gone into rethinking about their means of trying to reach freedom, which we failed in. There was a poll conducted a week ago, and it shows really shocking results. All the organization lost popular support. Fatah lost from 76% to 52%. Hamas went down from 51% to 36%, and in some places in Gaza to 19%. All the left-wing parties, Popular Front, Democratic Front, etc., have just 1% of the public support. And so all the body politics of Palestine have lost support from the public. Why? The public feels that they all failed. Okay? Now, what remained of our negotiations with Hamas on unity today is just about the employees. It's not about the negotiating strategy, it's not about the war strategy, not about whether we are struggling for an independent state in Gaza and the West Bank or an independent state all over Palestine, not about the right of the refugees, not about any of that. It's about the employees of Hamas and the Qassam military employees that Hamas wants us to absorb them in the civil service of the united government. And they claim there are 70,000. 70,000 means 150% of our present employees, which would be a big burden. So the negotiations with Hamas today is about money. It's about how do you resolve the financial problem of the employees. And it's not about anything strategic anymore, which, by the way, gives me some optimism. I mean, financial problems can be solved. The final analysis, you can find the formula. But strategic political problems cannot. I mean, if they were still insisting that Palestine be an Islamic state, that is something that is very difficult for me to swallow. But if the problem is how do you deal with the employees that now with unity might lose their livelihood, I think seriously about the solution. Next week we are going to Switzerland. The Swiss are holding a very important international conference to discuss that issue to help the Palestinians achieve unity, which really gives me some hope that it's not too far away. It can be achieved. And once we achieve it, we can go to elections. And we can go to a democratization of our society. And we can give more to our public to express its ideas and feelings and participate in the decision making, which I think would help regain our public. If you cannot show victory to your people, at least involve them in the difficulty of reaching that victory. That they have to really contribute ideas as to how do you go about it. We tried warfare and we failed, and we tried negotiations and we failed. Well, what do? All right, I gave you from the podium some of the things we are trying to do, including the French initiative, including the national unity, including the democratization, including the non-violent struggle, including the international pressure. All of these are means we are trying to use when military struggle and negotiations have failed. Maybe we can get a new method of negotiations with the kind of conditions I just told you, that settlements should stop, that an international group should do that there will be a deadline, that the political prisoners will be released, that this and that. We continue to try ways and means of achieving our freedom. We have not given up.
Yes, please.
May I ask, what would you think the role of the diaspora, Palestinian diaspora, would be in all this? do you see any extension of the on-the-ground realities being reflected in the diaspora? Would they have any role in any future settlement? I mean, the 200,000 people that you mentioned who returned to the West Bank in the 90s, would you see a bigger potential there in the future?
There are two aspects of what you are talking about. How can you involve the refugees outside in the diaspora more in affairs of their country? And that has both powers and responsibilities. I mean, they want to be involved in the decision making, they have to contribute more to the costs of that decisions that will be taken. And I think they are ready. I mean, the questions, the Palestinians in the diaspora have become Germans and Jordanians and Brazilians and all, but their commitment to the country really have not changed. And therefore, I think we have not succeeded yet in that kind of involvement I'm talking about. Involve them more in decisions relating to their country, bring them more to participate and contribute to the struggle of their country, but at the same time assure them that you are going to struggle for the right of return as much as you are struggling for an independent state. Because I know that many of our people in the diaspora at one time has given up. They don't see us give enough attention to their right of return as we are giving to our right to self-determination and building a state in Palestine. And the two are not contradictory, but you really need to show them by actual action that you really mean it, that an independent Palestinian state, they will be participants in making and in returning to. And I think that herein lies a very important trick in bringing unity between the outside and the inside. Some people in the outside do not want to come back. But people have to have the right to choose, to decide whether they want to stay Germans and Swedes or they want to really come back to Palestine. I'll tell you a story about Chile. You know, Brazil recognized Palestine when the last day of Lula da Silva's administration before Rousseff took over. And he meant it. He didn't want to make it difficult for her to get elected, so he delayed that decision to the very, very last day. During that inauguration, Lula da Silva invited 14 presidents of South American countries to attend the celebration for, you know, the coming in of Dilma Rousseff. And he arranged that every one of them come to meet Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian delegation. He set even the appointments with the hope that everyone that comes will recognize the state of Palestine. That's what he really told. As a result, we got 14 recognitions engineered by Lula da Silva. But one of them would not do it without questions, and that is the Chilean president. The Chilean president said, I will ask you 2 questions. If you answer them to my satisfaction, I will recognize the state of Palestine. Okay. Question 1. Do you think, Mr. Abbas, that recognizing you is a substitute to negotiations? That is, you simply become a president of a state that doesn't exist instead of doing the hard work of being involved in serious negotiations. I don't mean American run negotiations, really serious negotiations. So Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, answered at length, telling him, no, I'm committed to negotiations. My only complaint is about the kind of negotiations that has failed in the last 20 years. We want negotiations that have a better chance of success. I don't see you recognizing me as a substitute. I see it as an encouragement to go to negotiations and achieve this. He said, 10 على 10, 10 over 10, you succeed. Second question, why should I recognize you? It's going to cost me, he said. The Americans will be angry, the Israelis will be angry, and I will have to pay a price for recognizing you. Do you really need my Please tell me, why should I do it? Okay? So Mahmoud Abbas, our president, said Nabeel Shahid will answer that question. So I asked him the following question. I said, may I ask you now a question? He said, yes, of course you may. I said, you have 450,000 Palestinian immigrants who have become Chilean citizens. Is that true? He said, yes, it's true. They are 5% of your population, but they have 19% of the members of parliament. Don't you think that's remarkable? He said, of course, very remarkable. They own 4 of the biggest 5 banks of Chile, financing Chile's development. Is that true? He said, yes, it is true. They have the best football team called El Palestino, which wins all the tournaments. Is that true? He said, yes, it is true. I said, they are not mafiosi, they are not corruptors, they are not robbers, they do not deal in drugs. He said, no. They are an excellent population, excellent part of our population. I said, do they have loyalty to Chile? He said, yes, of course they do. Are you proud of them, Mr. President? He said, of course I am. Mr. President, do you mind if they keep some of their love and fidelity to their own original country, Palestine? He said, of course not. He said, why don't you recognize Palestine? He said, you answered my question. The next morning he recognized Palestine. The story really is to tell you about our pride in our Palestinians in the diaspora. And I think they need to be brought in. They need to have more participation. It is their country after all. Remember, I spent all my life in the diaspora. I just came back to Palestine in 1994. And the first thing I've done was to go to Jaffa and to look at my house, which they turned into a drug addict curing something. And when I went to my home in Jaffa, I remember Nqoussia. Because in Nqoussia, I remember Jaffa. Nqoussia has these bougainvillea trees over your hedges. You can get the scent of jasmine and orange flower. And there is a lot of similarity between Jaffa and Nqoussia. And so when I go to Jaffa, I remember Nqoussia. When I go to Nqoussia, I remember Jaffa. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to thank the Minister for an extremely informative, very instructive. I, for one, learned from it. I congratulate you on such fantastic discussion. On behalf of the University, the Dialogue Chair in Eastern Studies, the Diplomatic Academy, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you all for being here.